All right, hey guys, it's Nate Story with Bright Tech here, and today we are excited to talk about how efficient LED grow lights are. So there is a whole bunch of stuff out there on LED grow lights. You hear about them left and right. Growers are all using them these days. There's the old school dudes that say they're complete crap and the spectrum is off and you can't get good production. There are all the young guys that are just like, these things are awesome, they're energy efficient, they're the way of the future. And so a lot of the debate at the core of this whole thing is whether or not, one, they're as efficient as they say they are, and two, whether or not they're worth the cost. So right now we're going to talk about LED light efficiency and explain kind of how they're more efficient and what we can do to make them even more efficient than they already are. All right, so the first question is kind of what are the electrical and mechanical differences between LED lighting and traditional lighting fixtures? So fundamentally, LEDs are totally different, all right? And if you guys have seen the lighting guide, we will put the link to the lighting guide below in the description below, so you can get to it really, really easily. In the lighting guide, we describe in detail how LEDs work. So with LEDs, we have an anode and a cathode, and basically a semiconductor, right? And the electricity is flowing through this semiconductor. And it doesn't, it's called a semiconductor, it doesn't conduct perfectly, right? So the electricity, not all of it makes it through. Some of it in that process is converted into light, all right? Now the great thing about this is depending on what kind of semiconductor it is, you get a very specific spectrum of light. So you're not just getting, you know, crazy, unpredictable spectra out of this semiconductor. You're getting a very, very specific spectrum, which is awesome for us because we know from the previous videos on spectrum and plant use efficiency that plants absorb in a very specific range. And more importantly, plants are most efficient at two kind of specific areas of the spectrum, right? In the blue, right around 450, somewhere between 447, 448 if we want to split hairs, and in the red around 660. And that is awesome because what it means is we can build LEDs that emit those exact bandwidths on the spectrum. When it comes down to the efficiency, we're emitting a very specific spectrum, so we're not emitting wavelengths that you can't see or the plants can't necessarily use. But we also have about a 40 to 50% efficiency rating on the LED itself. Okay, so if you're familiar with traditional HID, you know that traditional HID lights are, you know, the most amazing high-tech ones out there might be close to 30, but most of them are in like the 20, maybe 25% range on efficiency. So we've essentially doubled our efficiency by going to LEDs. What does this mean? This means that a 600 watt HID light, the equivalent for an LED would be somewhere around a 300 watt LED light, right? Because our efficiency is double. So that's just kind of the starting. Remember though that we're emitting very specific spectrum. So we get a little bit of a bump even on top of that because we're only emitting light that the plants can use. All right, so the second part of this is how does this make LEDs more efficient than traditional lighting fixtures, and how so? And really what this comes down to is the fact that one, the LEDs are more efficient right out of the gate. Two, we can emit a very specific spectrum, so we know that all of the light being emitted is usable. And then three is form factor. And the form factor basically is just how that light appears, right? What kind of a form it's in. Can we fit it in close to the produce? Does it need to be far from the produce? Answering those questions allows us to get even better efficiency because we can pack more produce in to a smaller space than we could with the traditional light. The next question is, so do LEDs lose energy through heat, and how much? So yes, when I say that an LED is 40 to 50% efficient, that means if I put 100 watts into a fixture, 50% of those watts are being emitted as light, and 50% of those watts are being wasted as heat, right? And there's a little over 3 BTU per watt. So if I put 100 watts into a fixture and I have 50 watts of waste heat, we know that's about 150 BTUs being produced by that light. So that waste heat is a really, really easy way for us to look at a fixture and start to understand or grasp how efficient it really is. So the last part of this is really understanding what are the considerations that growers should take into account when they're trying to get better efficiency out of their grow lights. So when we're talking about LEDs, everyone has this idea that LEDs are somehow, they're not producing heat, they're like, they're heat free, you know, this, that, and the other thing. That's not necessarily true. It is true that they're producing less heat than an HID light, right? Less, but not even like half the heat of an HID light. They're still producing a lot of heat, right? At the same wattages. So really with LEDs, the important thing to remember is the cooler you keep them, the better they perform. So there's this negative feedback loop, whereas the LED heats up, it produces less light. Okay, so as it heats up, it produces less light. Well, what does that mean? What it means is as it heats up, it produces more heat. So it gets hotter and produces less light, and gets hotter and produces less light. And there's a negative feedback loop down, spiraling downward until the LED, the heat losses from the LED, from the fixture, are kind of at steady state, right? And at steady state, that's where that's basically the functioning temperature of that LED. Well, as a producer, the goal is to raise that temperature. If you can raise that temperature up, you can get better efficiency out of your LEDs. You can produce more light and less heat. And so this is one of the easiest ways to get better efficiency. Keep your lights cool. The second one is make sure it's got a good power supply. So power supplies have a lot of different efficiencies. So this is a driver power supply. Here it referred to as a few different things, but there's an efficiency rating on it. Usually they're somewhere between like 75, actually not quite that low. They're usually like 80 to 95% efficient, depending on which ones you're getting. Get the higher efficiency lights. If it's a 1,000 watt power supply, you don't want to be dumping 200 watts as heat, right, as waste heat. You want to make sure that you're minimizing your heat losses from your power supply. So the more efficient, the better there. And then the last thing is really clearly understanding coverage. So when you're dealing with LED lights, make sure they're down close enough to the canopy of your produce, right? You can get them a lot closer than you can with HID lights because they produce a lot less heat. So the closer you get them, the better light absorption efficiency and the better your par values closer to the canopy. All right, guys, so that wraps up the video on LEDs and their efficiencies. If you guys have any questions, leave questions in the comments below. Make sure you check out the link below as well. That is going to take you to the lighting guide, which just explains all of this stuff in a lot more detail than I could possibly go into in a video. So thanks so much for watching, and as always, if you find this useful, please subscribe.